What's up, guys? So I thought today I would tell you guys about some crazy experiences I had when I was backpacking Europe when I was like 17 and 18. I keep seeing all these videos all around YouTube. I get recommended all the Storytime or YouTubes, you know, like, so I keep seeing all these like, I was kidnapped. I've not watched any, but I just keep seeing them. So I was like, oh, I have some really interesting like held hostage, kidnapped stories from traveling Europe. Just to give you guys a little bit of background, when I was in high school, I worked throughout high school, first at my family's shop and then as a lifeguard to save up money specifically to backpack Europe. Like, it was something I always wanted to do. I knew people from Europe who did the whole gap year thing and I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. So that's what I'd been doing. I'd saved up money, gone to Europe, whatever. I had a friend who went with me. And I'm not one of those people that immediately is like, oh, something bad could happen. Like, oh, we could literally be killed. Like, that's not ever been me. I'm always like, oh, it's gonna be great, it's gonna be fine, let's just jump out of the airplane, everything will be fine. So we went, I had no worries in the world, and there were a couple really like eye-opening things that happened that were actually scary, that I was like, oh my gosh, like this could be it. Like the actual end. There were like a ton of little tiny things that happened here and there that were really scary or frustrating or just uncomfortable, but in terms of like actually horrifying experiences, there are two that really particularly come to mind. The first really scary experience was actually in Poland, and we'd taken train throughout like different parts of Europe and we'd ended up in Poland, and our plan was to take a bus from the train station to the airport so we could fly to Greece, because we had connecting flights to go to Egypt, which was like something that neither one of us had planned originally in this whole trip planning, but then I was like, let's go to Egypt. So we were going to Egypt and we had to get there at a certain date. So we ended up at the station in Poland and we look around for like bus information, obviously in a different language, can't find anything. And so we try to ask people, which obviously a lot of them don't speak English, and we couldn't find anybody who could really give us an answer. Like, is there a public bus? Nobody seemed to know. So we decided to call a taxi. Like, somebody's like, you should just call a taxi, kind of like, not in English, but that's the general gist. They point at like the taxi sign. So we call a taxi, the guy pulls up and we hand him a paper. That paper had our hotel address on it, and our hotel was supposedly like a mile away from the airport. It was super close, and we weren't entirely sure how we were getting from the motel to the airport because our flight was like 4 in the morning or something crazy. But we figured we would talk to like the hotel people and figure that out, if there were like taxis or if they had a bus service or, you know, whatever the case may be. We weren't really that worried about it. We just needed to get to this particular hotel. And online, when we'd been reading about the public transit that we couldn't figure out anything about when we got there, it said that it took like 35 to 40 minutes to get to the hotel, or to get to the airport, and so we figured like a little less than that to get to the hotel. Anyways, it was all like planned out, 35 to 40 minutes to get there. And so this taxi driver, he's looking at it and he can't seem to figure out where we're going. And so we kind of give him another address and it's the airport, and he's like, he like does a finger thing, and then he pulls out his phone and he's talking to somebody, and we're like, what is he doing? And he talks and talks and talks and talks like 15 minutes. The meter is running, by the way, just like getting that coin right there. So he's on the phone. Eventually he's like, yeah, we'll go. And so he starts going, and we're like expecting, because with public transit, 35, 40, you know, somewhere in there, like probably a taxi is going to be like 15, 20 minutes, like reasonably, because public transit buses stop all the time, right? So we're sitting there, 15 minutes goes by, the guy pulls out his phone and makes another call, talks for a long time, continues driving like 70 on the road, and there's other cars, and it was super scary, and hangs up. And he just glances back at us, and we're thinking like, okay, we gotta be getting close at this point, you know, whatever. Nope, we go another 45 minutes. At this point, we're getting like a little edgy, and we're like, what's going on? Why is this guy just literally driving around in circles to rack up money? But then we started getting out into like the countryside. Like, we were rarely passing other cars. The road was super narrow. It was getting like dark out. We'd started this adventure like probably noon, 1, 2, somewhere in there. I don't remember the exact time, but it had started to get a little dusky. Like, you could tell the sun was gonna set in the next couple of hours. It was getting darker, and we just kept driving further and further and further out into the countryside. And we were just getting more and more nervous because we're like, what is going on? Okay, clearly we're probably not going towards the airport at this point, because the airport is probably near the city-ish, and why is this taking so long? And why is this guy continually on his phone? Because he kept calling or like picking up calls and talking and talking and talking and glancing back at us, and we're like, what is going on? So we just continue driving, and like hours were going by at this point, and we're like thinking to ourselves, and we actually like talked a little bit, but we were also trying not to talk because we were like, what if he does understand English? Like, we didn't want him to know what we were thinking. But we had one theory, which is that he was just driving us around for money, right? Like, the longer you drive somebody, the more the meter's gonna rack up. It's gonna cost us a ton of money. What are we gonna do? We're not even from that country. Like, the options are pretty limited. The other option that went through our minds was that we were going to be taken out into the country somewhere, and either all of our stuff was going to be stolen from us, like everything we had, which wasn't much, we were backpackers, or we were gonna be sold to somebody. We were like, I was like 17, I think I turned 18 like a week prior or something, like pretty young, naive American girls in Poland trusting the taxi driver to do what he's supposed to do. So we were talking to each other, kind of conveying these concerns, and my friend is kind of like, well, what can we do? You know, we're going 70 down a country road, it's almost dark, and like, we just, what are our options? If he stops, we can get out and run if it looks like sketchy, but like, other than that, are we gonna bail out of a car going 70? Like, probably not. So we just like continued to sit there and wait and have to like wait for our future, not knowing what was gonna happen. And I think we were both getting really nervous and really edgy. But also at that time, this was like almost 10 years ago, it was like 9 years ago, we didn't have cell phones. Like, I didn't even have a cell phone, let alone have one that worked in Europe. Like, we didn't have a way to get a hold of anybody or contact anyone or look online and get any other information. Like, we were literally isolated. Thankfully there were two of us, so we were like a little bit more comfortable together. But eventually this guy keeps going on the phone, keeps looking back at us, keeps driving out into the country. It is now pitch black, by the way, and we see a sign. And the sign said the name of our hotel on it. And we were like so ecstatic at this point. We were like, oh my gosh, we are not going to die, probably. And so we're like tapping the guy on the shoulder and like pointing to the sign, and he looks at us and he's like, eh, and he keeps driving, and we're like, oh no. And so at this point, we literally thought about like, should we just bail out of the car? Like, should we just take our backpacks and bail out of the car? Like, we're probably gonna get seriously injured, but is that safer than just continuing to drive with this guy? Because that was the first sign, the first like inkling of civilization we'd seen in hours. Around the time when I think we were both kind of considering the possibility of maybe we should just bail and try to get to that hotel and call the cops, we saw the airport signs, and we were like, thank God, like, we are probably gonna be okay. So he pulls into the airport, drops us off. It is like not a tiny airport, but it was small enough that it was completely closed because it was late enough at night that they were closed. So nobody was there. We were completely locked out of it. We were stuck outside. He kind of threw our bags out, charged us a ton of money, and then just left us there. And we see him get on the phone as he's leaving. And we're just kind of like, okay, well, our choices. We can stay outside the airport that's closed all night by ourselves in the middle of nowhere, seemingly, or the second choice is to walk back down the road towards the sign that we saw that said that our hotel was out there somewhere. And the thoughts running through our heads at that point were that he could have been stalling, dropping us off so somebody else could be picking us up, or robbing us. Like, we weren't sure what was going on still because it was such a weird situation. And like, the fact that he kept picking up his phone and then like looking at us while he was on the phone, that was super weird. And the fact that a taxi driver would pretend not to know where the airport was, like, and it was like an official taxi and everything from Poland. It wasn't like a sketchy situation in that sense. So the whole thing was really, really strange. And so we decided to try to walk back towards our hotel. Needless to say, we made it back towards our hotel. It took us, I think we got there between 10 and 11 at night, like at the hotel, and got checked in, and we had to get up and walk back to the airport in the morning because there weren't any buses or anything. But it did end up to be okay, and we made it back, and the walk back took us like an hour or two just to find this stupid hotel in the dark. But we were happy to just get off the like main road and to get away, and we figured, okay, if somebody comes, like, he has our address where we're supposed to be, but like, he would have to come to a hotel and find, you know what I mean? Like, so we felt a lot safer, and we thought we were probably good, and we didn't give him information about like our flight or where we were going or any of that, so that was all good. To this day though, I don't know what his initial intention was, if it really was just to rack up some more money, or if it was like to allow somebody, like tell somebody where we were so they could come like rob us, or to sell us. Like, we don't know what his intentions were, because just as a taxi driver with, like, we had his license number and everything. We wouldn't think that he would want to jeopardize his job by driving us around in circles forever. So it was really a weird situation. But the second really uncomfortable situation we had in a foreign country was actually in Egypt, which just culturally is so different than the United States. Like, even Eastern countries in Europe are a lot different than the United States. But in Egypt, we literally were held hostage for some coins. So essentially we decided to go to Egypt. It was kind of a last minute decision, and a lot of chaos was happening in that area. Like, civil war broke out right after we left. And so it wasn't like a super safe place to go as like American girls by ourselves. So we decided to like spend some extra coin and get a guide. And our guide was going to be with us from one evening through like the next few days. But our flight came in the morning. So we ended up getting to Egypt early. We kind of figured it would take a while to take like a taxi to our hotel and get settled in, and then like it would be evening. But no. It literally took like no time at all though. We were to our hotel so fast. It was incredible because the airport in Egypt, there's really like no procedure that we went through. We literally walked off the plane and got in a taxi cab. It was just like bam, there. So we got to our hotel within probably 40 minutes of getting there in the morning. And then we, got all of our stuff in. We were all set to go, and we're like, okay, we have hours until our guide shows up to pick us up and like take us to our first things that we're doing. So what should we do? And so we decided, because we were in like the Americanized area where we're like staying in a nicer hotel on the Nile, like we'd spent more money on this portion of our trip just because we were like more comfortable doing that. And so we were like, let's go ahead and walk down like the edge of the Nile and just take pictures, and we'll, check out just like local easy stuff to check out. We went down and we had to cross these 2 lanes of traffic. So the traffic in Egypt is insane. We get across the first lane, literally you have hands on hoods of cars like trying not to get run over. It was insane. So we got across 1 lane of traffic and we had to get across a 2nd lane, and this Egyptian man comes up to us and he's like, do you need help getting across the traffic? And we're like thinking like he's gonna want like a tip or something, how other people do. So we're like, oh no, we're fine. And he's like, no, I insist, let me show you Egyptian like hospitality. And we're like, okay, sure, whatever. And so when the traffic has little breaks in it, he grabbed my friend's arm, who grabbed my arm, and he just drug us through the traffic, which honestly I don't know that we would have ever gotten across without him, because I don't think either of us would have been brave enough to go. But we were like zigzagging through moving cars. At one point my foot actually got stuck under a car and they had to pull me out from under it as it was going. It was insane. So we get across the road and he says, so what are you guys doing? And we're like, oh, we're just gonna take some pictures along the Nile, whatever. Oh, well, in that case, can I show you to my friend's shop? You can see it from here. And it literally was probably only 50 feet away. It was like right down the road on the same side. We didn't have to cross the road again. It was great. So we were like, okay, sure, thinking, obviously this guy wants to help his friend sell some stuff and we're not going to buy anything, but he was nice enough to cross traffic with us, so we'll go with him. So we go with him to this shop, and it was a nice shop. It was honestly fine, and the people gave us some tea. And during this whole visit session, the guy who had taken us there, he leaves. And so now we're just there with his friends. And we have a conversation, and they're talking to us, and we decide not to buy anything, even though they're very much so like, oh, we'll just stay, have more like coffee, we can have tea, we can give you soda, like, offering all these different things, trying to get us to stay. We're like, no, it's fine. So we leave, and we realize as we're leaving, we're now on a strip of stores. And we're like, you know what? We're probably not going to have time to do any like shopping besides now, so we might as well. And so we start going in store after store after store, and every single store, same thing. You go in, they offer you a beverage, it's like a hospitality thing, and you kind of have to take it unless you're really rude. So we were taking these beverages and spending a little time with the owners, and we did buy a few things. We bought some, little trinkets here and there to take back home. And we kind of get to a point where we're looking at the watch and we're like, okay, we need to go back and get ready we were going on a night cruise that night, which was like a big dinner thing. And we had somebody picking us up at a certain time, so we're like, okay, we need to go get ready for this. We go to turn around, and there's a guy that's standing at the next shop in the line of shops. And he goes, oh, girls, why don't you come over and at least sign my guest book? It looks like you're about to leave, but like at least sign my guest book. And he had this guest book outside, and he's really the only owner that was like standing outside his store with a guest book, or outside his store at all, but especially with a guest book. So my friend takes the pen, writes something in it, flips the page, then I write my information, which by the way, later come to find out, she put a fake name and address, and I put my real name and address. Like, girl didn't have my back there. We got done signing the guest book, and as we're kind of saying goodbye to this guy and like being like, oh, thanks, we're gonna leave now, bye, this other guy comes up out of the store. And what's interesting about this particular store is that it was underground. Like, most of the stores were up above ground and they were open and they were like very friendly looking, but this one was legit downstairs, underground, basement level. Like, you couldn't just see into it. So this other guy comes up, he's much younger, and the guy goes, oh, this is my son, and the son goes, oh, please come have like a drink with us. And we're like, oh, we really can't, we have to be back. And he's like, oh, it'll only be a few minutes, like, you signed my dad's guest book, come down and have a drink, and we won't, you know, you don't need to buy anything, just come have a drink. The thing about being in other countries is that you really don't want to like offend a whole culture of people, which I feel like Americans are pretty good at doing. We finally were kind of like, okay, but we can't stay for that long, and they were like, oh, that's great, that's fine, whatever. And so the son, the younger guy, he goes down, and my friend follows him, and I'm following her, and the other guy follows me. So we're literally like smushed in between them. We go downstairs. As soon as we got downstairs, I was like, something is wrong, because in most of the stores, for one thing, like I said, they were above ground, they were open, you could see their wares. This had nothing. There was nothing down there at all. It was completely like empty. And we get down there, and there's a table at one end, only thing in the room. So they show us to the table, and they had us slide into the back, and they pushed the table in so that we were, like, if I'm sitting where it was against the wall, and the table would be slid in, right? So then the older guy, he sits over here, like on this edge, and the younger guy goes and brings back some tea, and he sits down here on this end, and they give us the tea. And as we're sitting there, another guy comes out. He has like an armful of products. He comes out, throws them on the table, and then he goes back upstairs, basically like to watch, you know what I mean? So he's blocking the doorway. These two other guys are basically blocking us into this table. Like, we could get out if we literally wiggled our ways out and jumped over the table, but other way than that, there's like no way out. Like, we're stuck in this table, and the older guy is like, so what do you want to buy? And we're like, no, we already told you, we were done shopping, like, we literally didn't even want to come down here, we're just having a drink and we're leaving, and we're not spending any money. And the guy's like, oh, well, you're not leaving then. And we're like, what? And he's like, no, you buy something or you stay here. At this particular point, I sort of started to panic a little bit, because I was like, okay, there's somebody watching the front door, the top, there's an old guy here, there's a younger guy there, and there are more other people in the back, we could hear them, and we're being told that we have to pay our way out. Like, they will let us go if we buy something. So we were like, no, we're not buying anything. And they're like, okay, well, then you're not leaving. So eventually, after they showed us item after item after item, we're like, this is getting serious. Like, they are not going to let us go unless we buy something. Because realistically, like I said, the only way out was over the table, which would require us to wiggle our ways up and then like jump over the top of the table. And that was pretty much it. That was like your only way out. And if you got to that point, would they actually physically block our ways out? Like, we didn't know. Eventually, as they were bringing more and more products, I was like, all right, I just want to leave. Like, I want to leave, because we kept trying to get up and leave and they weren't letting us. And I just was like playing through scenarios in my head, and like, if they wanted to keep us there, they could have. There were plenty of people there that they could keep us there. So eventually I was just like, okay, I'll take this thing. And they gave me this little trinket, and it cost way too much money. It was like 8 times more than any other similar product that we'd seen at really nice stores. And so I paid for it, and they let us up and they let us go. As we walked up the stairs, the guy at the top, he moved aside and let us out. And then he catches this couple that's walking down the street. He's like, oh, come sign our guest book. Come in, we'll give you drinks. And we're just like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Oh my gosh. But yeah, that was a horrifying moment, because we were probably not down there for that long, but it felt like we were literally going to be trapped forever. And I also had worries about, like, if I pull out my money, is he going to like try to take my money? Like, all of it that I had, like, what's going to happen? I also had my passport on me, so they could take that if they wanted. It was just a really sketchy experience where it was like, okay, they had all the power and control, and we were stuck there and forced to pay money to leave. Anyway, so those are two of like the scariest things that happened when I backpacked to Europe when I was a lot younger, and thankfully both of them worked out right, but it definitely taught me that, you know, you should be prepared for the worst in some cases, although, like, don't worry, you know what I mean? But also, if you want to travel, or if you have any plans to travel in the future, 99% of our experiences were amazing. And honestly, like, the bad experiences stick with you more, I think, than the good ones do, because they're like actually traumatizing. So yeah, don't get too discouraged or be like, oh crap, now I can't go do that, because like, you totally should. If you want to travel, you should travel. Anyways, I hope you guys liked the story. I know it was a long one, but if you did, it'd be awesome if you hit the like button down below. You can also subscribe if you're not subscribed and you want to see more garbage content like this where I just talk, and in between uploads you can find me everywhere at Kelsey Ventures, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!